sunrise had become Ayla's favorite time. It was quiet then, peaceful, and in those few still minutes before the world came alive, she could almost imagine the earth she'd left behind. Their camp sat nestled near a bend in the river, shielded by a low ridge on one side and a thicket of twisting alien trees on the other. It no longer looked temporary. The awning Ayla had built from flexible branches and stitched hides created a shady workspace, its edges staked down with braided vine. Beneath it stood a primitive table and chair, rough-hewn but sturdy, where she sketched her maps and read old Earth stories pulled from the Cat Shuttle's fading databanks. Next to the table, a permanent stone stove, crafted from river rocks and sealed with a paste of wet clay and ash, stood as the heart of the camp. The fire rarely died. Smoke curled lazily from the side vent, the scent of burning wood and drying hides perfuming the air. Spears with stone tips leaned against a drying rack heavy with fur, and a crude ladder led to the shuttle's modified cargo bay. Now a walk-in freezer kept chilled by maintenance drones working under Bob's direction. Ayla stepped out from the shuttle, now barefoot and dressed in a tunic of thick, dark fur, belted with woven vines. Her old uniform was folded away in the storage bin under her cot, far too small for her now. She had outgrown it in every way. Peck was already waiting. The terror bird had grown fast, taller than Ayla now, with sleek feathers the color of firelight, gold at the chest, blue and green down her back, and vivid red tail plumes that shimmered when she moved. Her amber eyes watched Ayla with a deep intelligence, head cocked in that curious, ever-alert way. "Morning, Peck," Ayla said, stretching. "You ready?" Peck chirped once, a low guttural sound, and nuzzled Ayla's hand. The bond between them was unshakable now. From the moment Ayla had refused to kill her, they had grown closer every day. She had taught Peck to track and flank prey. Peck, in turn, had taught Ayla when to listen, when to wait. They were an efficient hunting team, and they hadn't gone hungry in months. Inside the shuttle, Bob flickered to life in his usual spot near the command console. The blue hologram adjusted to humanoid shape, his glowing circular core pulsing steadily. "Sector 11-6 remains unmapped," he said without prompting. Based on satellite feed, the crater is approximately 2.3 kilometers wide and drops at least 121.92 meters at the center. "I recommend caution, and I'm always careful," Ayla said with a grin, brushing a hand through her unruly hair. She had tied it back with a leather cord. "We'll take the long way around the ridge and come in from the west. Easier to climb down if the walls aren't too steep." Bob nodded. "I've loaded updated topography data to your scanner. Atmospheric conditions remain stable, no major shifts in radiation, and—" He paused for effect. "Happy early birthday. 1 week to go." Ayla smirked. "Thanks, Bob. I'm not planning on getting older just yet. Too late. Chronological time continues regardless of personal preference." She laughed and grabbed her scanner, sidearm, and a pouch of dried root vegetables. Safe to eat thanks to Bob's early testing. Her pack was already stocked with rope, emergency flares, and a few trade tools made from bone and stone. Before leaving, Ayla paused by the stone stove. She placed another log in the fire and adjusted a small pot filled with a stew of tubers and sliced meat. The smell made her stomach rumble. "Up back by sunset," she said, more to herself than anyone. Peck squawked lightly and stepped ahead, leading the way. Hours later at the crater rim, Sector 11-6. The land rolled gently before it dropped away. Ayla crouched at the crater's edge, peering over the mossy rocks into the vast depression below. The walls were steep but not sheer, a jagged slope of loose soil, metallic-looking plants, and scattered boulders. At the base, something glittered faintly, mineral deposits perhaps, or water pooling in a shaded basin. Peck stayed close but kept her distance from the edge, wary of the loose terrain. Her claws dug into the dirt, feathers ruffling as she scanned the crater with keen eyes. "Oh, this place must have been hit hard," Ayla murmured, recording a short voice note for later. "Looks like a meteor impact, or maybe a volcanic vent. But the soil's too stable for that. I'll need samples." Bob's voice buzzed softly through her earpiece. "Confirmed impact crater, likely several thousand years old. residual traces of iridium and nickel consistent with asteroid collisions. Good find, Ayla. She beamed. Knew it. Over the next 2 hours, Ayla and Peck made their descent. They found signs of animal tracks, smaller herbivores, possibly the same deer-like creatures they hunted for food. Ayla moved cautiously, spear at the ready, Peck circling wide to watch the ridge. At the base, Ayla found the glittering deposit of crystalline rocks, cracked open like geodes, with faint electric residue Bob couldn't identify. She pocketed a small one, wrapped it in cloth, and looked up at the sky. The stars were visible in daylight here, just faint specks through the thinning orange atmosphere. She had begun mapping them months ago, slowly plotting constellations and naming them after old stories from Earth. Her favorite? One cluster she called unforgiving. It resembled the engagement ring her mother had worn, with a bright central star she called Hope. Back at camp, she would add the crater to her map, sketching its walls and noting the mineral types. Bob would calculate the blast radius. Later, maybe they'd finish reading The Wizard of Oz or an old sci-fi series about a boy who could control the wind. But for now, she sat next to Peck, arms draped around her warm, feathered side, and watched the wind stir alien grass across the crater floor. I like it here, Ayla whispered. It's not home, but it's ours now. Peck nudged her gently. Ayla packed the last of the mineral samples into her pouch and brushed her hands clean on her fur leggings. The sun, low and amber, now was beginning its descent toward the far ridge. It was time to head home. They'd taken a winding route down, but she spotted a switchback trail they could follow to climb out faster. "And let's go, girl," she said, slinging her spear over her shoulder. "And stew should be perfect by the time we're back." Peck let out a soft chuff of agreement, her tail feathers flicking once before she turned to lead. Birds, or something like them, called distantly from the trees beyond the crater. Ayla started to attach the travois until Peck stepped away and then stopped dead. The feathered raptor's entire body tensed, neck arched, eyes fixed on the sky with intense, unblinking focus. "What is it?" Ayla asked, pausing. She followed Peck's line of sight, straight up. Something passed between her and the sun, blotting out the light in an instant. Ayla gasped as a huge shadow dropped overhead, massive wings flaring wide, a screech splitting the silence. It hit the ground hard, sending a spray of dust and pebbles into the air. For a breathless second, Ayla could only stare. It looked just like Peck, but bigger, much bigger. Its feathers were darker, a bruised mix of purple and steel blue. Its talons gouged into the dirt, and its hooked beak snapped in the air. Eyes the color of burnished gold locked onto her. Ayla didn't have time to react. Peck launched herself into the air with a screech, slamming into the intruder's side with shocking force. The larger bird stumbled, clawing at the ground, and pivoted to face Peck instead of Ayla. They circled each other, two living weapons made of bone, claw, and instinct. The sound that followed wasn't just animalistic. It was language of a kind. High-pitched clicks, throat-deep growls, and warbling chirps like calls across a great forest. Ayla froze, spellbound, heart pounding in her chest. They lunged at each other, twice quick, deliberate feints with their talons raised. But neither struck. Their dance was precise, measured. Then just as suddenly it ended. They both reared up and let out sharp, piercing cries that echoed through the crater. A challenge? A warning? The larger bird hesitated, gave one last lingering stare at Ayla, and bolted. It turned with a leap, its claws digging deep as it launched into the air. Powerful wings lifted it out of the crater and over the trees beyond in moments, until it vanished like a shadow swallowed by dusk. Only the wind remained. Bob's voice crackled through her earpiece, calm but firm. "Ayla, what was that?" "I detected a large lifeform drop into your sector and depart on a westbound trajectory. Can you confirm visual contact?" "Yeah," Ayla breathed. Her heart hadn't slowed yet, and it was like Peck, but bigger, meaner. "I think it was going to attack me." And I believe that would have been the most probable outcome had Peck not intervened. Peck turned and walked to Ayla, feathers puffed slightly, breathing heavy. Her eyes scanned Ayla from head to toe, checking, assessing. "And okay," Ayla said softly, resting a hand against Peck's warm flank. "Thanks to you." Peck let out a quiet trill and lowered her head. Then, without being told, she stepped into the harness position, ready for the travois. Ayla hooked the gear onto Peck's back, her hands still shaking a little. They began the climb out again, this time quicker, both of them constantly glancing over their shoulders. The air felt different now, charged, alive. As they crested the ridge, Ayla cast one last look back into the crater. The light slanted long across the stone walls, the glittering minerals now cast in shadows. She could still feel it. Something had been watching, and maybe still was. "Bob?" she asked quietly. "Yes, Ayla?" "Run continuous scans in a wide radius tonight. Movement, thermal, anything, just in case. Already initiated. I will notify you of any anomaly. But rest assured, Ayla, your decision to trust Peck may have saved your life today." Ayla reached forward and gently stroked the feathers at the base of Peck's neck as they made their way home. "I know," she whispered. "She always does." And somewhere beyond the hills and rising stars, something else moved, silent, unseen, and aware of the girl and her guardian. Visitors in the night. Night had come heavy. Inside the shuttlecraft cat, Ayla lay curled under a blanket stitched from deer hides. The thick furs warm but not comforting. Her eyes stared at the steel ceiling above her bed, tracking every strange sound. She'd grown used to the nighttime chorus, the distant insect chirps, the creaking trees, the occasional low howl from the eastern woods. But tonight, everything was louder. The sounds pressed in, restless and too close. Peck paced back and forth just inside the ramp, feathers puffed, talons clicking on the metal floor. She'd been unsettled since sundown, pausing often to peer outside into the dark, her breath hissing through her nostrils. Every time Ayla stirred, Peck twitched and turned her head toward the door. "Bob," Ayla whispered, keeping her voice low. "Anything?" The glowing blue hologram shimmered into view by her bedside. "She and I have been scanning in a 150-meter radius using low-frequency thermal imaging. A large heat signature larger than Peck is circling the camp. Pattern is irregular. Speed suggests cautious movement. I've detected no direct approach, yet." Ayla pulled the blanket closer. "So it is the other one, it most likely. Its movements suggest reconnaissance, or stalking." Ayla glanced at Peck, who was now standing fully still at the ramp, feathers low, head cocked. She hadn't growled or shown signs of threat, not yet. But she hadn't relaxed either. Outside, a branch cracked, then another, slow, deliberate. She just sat up, crossed the room, and settled beside Peck. Together they sat in silence, girl and bird, eyes on the dark beyond the shuttle's light. The circling sound continued, rustling leaves, soft pawfalls on moss, always distant, never near. The night stretched on like a held breath. Morning broke cloudy. As the ramp door creaked open with a hiss of hydraulics, Peck darted out like a bolt of fur and feathers. Ayla, slower to rise, yawned and stretched, shaking off the sleepless night. Her eyes were puffy, her mind foggy. "And save I vote no exploring today," she muttered. "School day it is." "And I concur," Bob replied, educational modules loaded and ready. "We'll begin with planetary geology." Ayla moved through her morning routine. She used a small basin of boiled, cooled water to wash her face. Then she stoked the fire in the stone stove, set a pan with strips of dried meat to warm, and chewed slowly on a root biscuit made of mashed alien tubers. She had just sat down under the awning when she heard it again, those distinctive raptor-like clicks and calls. Not from Peck, from the ridge. She froze. Slowly she stood and walked to the ramp. The sound grew louder, deliberate, vibrant, familiar. She peered out and saw it, the large, dark-feathered bird from yesterday, pacing again in the clearing beyond the shuttle. Peck's voice answered from somewhere unseen, high and melodic. The two were having a full-blown conversation. The cadence and rhythm were like song, like code, something ancient and wild. It sent shivers down Ayla's arms. Bob's voice rang sharp. "Ayla, I must insist the ramp be closed. We cannot risk exposure. I won't leave Peck out there alone." She stepped outside, spear in hand, but lowered. "Peck," she called. The forest answered with silence. Then Peck emerged from the trees at a light trot. She looked completely fine, tail feathers fanned, eyes bright. She moved straight to Ayla's side and nuzzled her gently. Then Ayla saw it. 20 meters away, partially hidden behind a boulder, the male bird had stopped pacing. He was watching, assessing. His posture was calm, no raised feathers, no signs of aggression. He didn't move closer, just watched. Breakfast was simple. Ayla reheated meat and tubers, adding wild greens Bob had approved for digestion. Peck sat to eat, relaxed, though she kept one eye fixed on the male bird. Ayla followed her gaze. "Oh, he's closer," she muttered. The bird was now within 10 meters, pacing again, a slow rhythm. "I don't like this," Bob said, his voice sharp. "Sis is encroachment behavior." Peck didn't seem concerned. She sat tall, watching both Ayla and the other bird, her claws tucked neatly under her body as she chewed on a hunk of meat. Maybe she told him about me," Ayla said, half joking, half hopeful. "Maybe she told him I'm safe." She picked up a spare piece of meat, turned, and tossed it gently toward the other bird. It landed just beyond the fire circle. The male sniffed the air, stepped forward cautiously, snatched the meat, and bolted into the trees without a sound. Ayla smirked. "Well, you're welcome." Bob sighed audibly. "Tess is ill-advised." Lunch came with a sense of déjà vu. The bird was back exactly 5 meters from the camp's edge, waiting. His tail flicked, his feathers rustled faintly, but he did not come closer. Ayla shared her lunch with him, tossing a bit of salted meat and greens. He took it, ate it there, didn't run. Peck still didn't react with hostility. Dinner played out the same way. By then, the bird was a fixture. Ayla even caught herself talking to it. "You better not think this means we're friends. You haven't even said thank you." Peck chuffed softly. Ayla took it as laughter. Bob, for his part, logged every interaction, since behavior is leading to domestication or dependency. Neither are sustainable long-term. Maybe he's lonely and/or calculating. That night, though, the sounds returned to normal. The trees creaked, the insects clicked, and nothing circled the camp. The next morning brought a surprise. As the ramp door hissed open, Peck bolted into the woods. Ayla yawned and rubbed her eyes. She shuffled down the ramp and stopped dead. At the base of the ramp lay a deer. Its neck was broken cleanly, blood still wet. It was fresh. "Bob," she said, "tell me that's not." Confirmed. "That is the same deer species you hunted last week. The specimen shows no signs of struggle. Death was swift and clean. It was placed here, deliberately." Then came the rustling. Ayla turned, and sure enough, there was the dark-feathered bird again. This time he wasn't pacing, he was dancing. Short, sharp steps, feathers flaring, head bobbing in that distinct pattern Ayla knew by heart. Peck danced like that every time she brought a kill home, every time she waited for Ayla's approval. She recognized it for what it was. "He's proud," she whispered, "and did this for me." She wasn't sure what to do, so she did what she always did when it came to trust. She got to work. With practiced precision, Ayla began to field dress the deer, gutting and cleaning it near the fire. As she worked, Peck reappeared, trotting in with an expectant look. Ayla smiled and tossed her a slab of fresh meat. "Here you go, you earned it." The male bird edged closer. Ayla hesitated, then tossed him a piece too. "No," Bob snapped. "Do not feed that bird. You're encouraging behavior we cannot control." "I'm not trying to control him," Ayla said, wiping her hands and trying to understand him. After the meal, while the meat smoked and hide stretched on the rack, Ayla took a few tentative steps toward the male. He stepped back, then bolted into the woods. Peck followed at a run, disappearing behind the trees. Ayla stood there, confused, a knot of uncertainty in her gut. Bob broke the silence. "Ayla? The second bird is male. This may explain Peck's increased vocalization and altered behavior." She nodded slowly. "Oh, yeah, it explains a lot." But as she looked into the woods, she wasn't sure if she felt relieved or uneasy, because sometimes animals acted out of instinct, and sometimes They acted with purpose, and this bird had a purpose. She was sure of it, sectors and shadows. The first rays of morning slipped through the shuttle's narrow viewport, casting soft amber light across the interior. The smells of damp earth and wood smoke from the evening's fire still lingered in the air. Ayla stirred gently, buried beneath her thick fur blanket, while the steady rhythm of Peck's breathing rumbled softly from her spot curled near the foot of the bed. Outside, the alien world awoke. Birds, tiny, chittering things that resembled dragonflies with feathers, flitted between trees. The wind sang low through the canopy, whispering ancient songs across the rolling plains. Bob's voice, smooth and calm as always, cut gently into the quiet. "Should I open the ramp door?" Ayla yawned. "Yes, please," she mumbled, rolling over and burying her face into her pillow of bundled furs. The ramp hissed open with a soft hydraulic sigh. Peck's eyes snapped open instantly. She rose to her feet and trotted down the ramp to begin her morning patrol, feathers ruffling in the breeze. Inside the shuttle, Ayla stretched, sat up slowly, and blinked sleep from her eyes. It's an astrometrics day, isn't it?" she asked. Bob responded with a tone that suggested he'd been waiting. "Correct. Your morning will consist of updated celestial mapping procedures and a review of rotational mechanics for gas giants. Additionally, we have the planned survey of Sector 11-7 this afternoon." Ayla rubbed her face. "Busy day. Can we start with breakfast?" "Of course." She shuffled into her boots and pulled on her fur tunic, then padded barefoot to the stove, where she reheated yesterday's stew rich with wild greens, root vegetables, and bits of smoked meat. As she stirred, the morning progressed as it often did. And like clockwork, the birds returned. Both terror birds Peck and the larger dark-feathered male appeared separately throughout the morning. The male never stayed long, never approached close, but made his presence known with flashes of movement on the edges of the clearing. At lunchtime, though, he returned in full, just as Ayla was portioning out a meal for her and Peck. She set their food near the stone stove, and Peck trotted up happily, nuzzling into Ayla's chest as she sat cross-legged. Ayla giggled, scratching gently under her friend's jaw. "I'm glad you're here," she whispered. "Even if you still shed like crazy," Peck chirped softly, leaning in closer. Ayla looked up at the male. He lingered 5 meters away, eyeing the food and then her. His posture was alert, cautious. His eyes burned with the same fierce intellect as Peck's, but they lacked the trust. She slid a chunk of meat across the ground in his direction. He took it, ate it in place. But when Ayla tried to rise and step toward him, just a single footfall, he backed away sharply. She paused, letting him be. "Still not ready," she muttered. "But maybe someday." Afternoon came slowly. The sky was streaked with high clouds, and a warm wind pushed across the plain. After finishing her lessons, Ayla lay stretched under the shade of the awning, reading one of her favorite books, The Resistance Chronicles, by Brian M. Brumbaugh. She had read it twice already, but something about the heroism, the struggle, the quiet rebellion spoke to her, especially now. Peck returned mid-afternoon alone and flopped beside her with a grunt of contentment. Ayla stroked her feathers gently and began reading aloud, her voice carrying softly on the wind. And in that moment, she read, they knew the stars were no longer out of reach. Peck blinked slowly, eyes half-lidded, as if the rhythm of Ayla's voice lulled her. But the male didn't come back for dinner. Ayla waited. She lingered by the fire, slowly roasting strips of meat and alien root slices. She portioned an extra bit and kept glancing toward the trees, but the shadows remained still. Peck didn't seem bothered, but Ayla was. She couldn't explain why. "And maybe he's hunting," she offered aloud. "Perhaps," Bob replied from the console inside. Or, "perhaps he has lost interest." Ayla didn't respond. She just kept staring at the tree line. The next morning was quiet. Too quiet. Bob's routine began as it always did. Reports, sensor checks, scheduling. Ayla rose slowly, still thinking about the male bird. She dressed in her foraging gear and prepared the travois for the day's exploration. Sector 11-7 was just northeast of the crater they had surveyed days ago. It bordered the jagged rocks but opened into an undulating sea of green hills and spotted tree clusters. It had been on her list for a while. Today felt like the day. With Peck at her side and her gear packed, Ayla set off. The hike took over an hour. Ayla foraged as they walked, plucking a new bulbous fruit that glowed faintly purple in the shade and looked suspiciously like a turnip. Peck trotted ahead, occasionally snapping at insects or pausing to sniff the wind. Midway through, they stumbled on something incredible, an alien tree, short and gnarled, with several trunks twisted into one, rose low to the ground. But instead of stretching upward, its limbs curled outward like a weeping willow, forming a dome-shaped canopy. Pale red leaves hung like ribbons. Ayla stepped inside the space it created. Light filtered down in shifting patterns. The ground beneath was soft and mossy. "'Tis is perfect," she whispered, pulling her sketch pad from her satchel. She took a few minutes to sketch the canopy, labeling the trunk structure and estimating the age of the tree. "Bob, remind me to get a soil sample on the way back." Logged. Then the world exploded. A deafening thump shook the ground. Birds screamed and scattered into the air. Peck hissed violently and shoved Ayla backward into the roots of the willow canopy, crouching protectively. A shadow fell across the field. "Ayla, take cover!" Bob shouted through the earpiece. Ayla didn't need telling twice. She dove behind the tangle of tree trunks, heart hammering. From the tree line ahead, it charged a towering creature easily 5 meters tall, its body muscular and scaled, like a monstrous alien version of a tyrannosaurus. Its head was horned and blunt, its mouth filled with dagger-like teeth. Each step sent tremors through the ground. It roared. Peck didn't run. She froze, crouching low and pulling her tail close. Ayla didn't dare breathe. The monster didn't see them. It thundered past, single-minded, smashing through smaller trees as it chased a fleeing herd of grazing creatures. Within moments, it had one pinned. Ayla squeezed her eyes shut as the creature's screams were silenced in a crunch of bone and blood. The predator fed. Peck remained absolutely still. So did Ayla. It felt like an hour passed before it was gone, lumbering over a distant ridge. "Is it gone?" Ayla whispered. "Clear," Bob confirmed. "I have no visual or thermal returns within 500 meters. Ayla stood on shaking legs, her back soaked with sweat. This planet, for all its beauty, was still wild, still dangerous. She spent the next hour surveying Sector 11-7 carefully, gathering notes, sketching new flora, and collecting samples, one of which resembled corn, its stalks pale blue and ribbed with knotty nodes. She cut a few with her stone knife and packed them in the travois. She also found several herbs that might be related to fennel or wild thyme. The walk back was quiet, almost too quiet. Back at camp, the fire crackled as Bob ran analysis on the new specimens. The corn had potential some starches, some sugars. One herb tested mildly anesthetic. Another carried a faint minty scent. Dinner was satisfying, filling, routine. But Ayla sat in silence longer than usual, her eyes always drifting toward the edge of the forest. The larger bird never came back. That night, Ayla lay awake. Peck snored softly beside her, warm and heavy. The stars glittered through the viewport above her bed, and she watched Hope, her favorite star in the ring cluster, shimmer in the sky. She thought of the male bird, of his gift, his dance. Where had he gone? Why had he disappeared? "Sabab," she whispered. "Any sign of him?" Negative. No large heat signatures within range. Ayla curled deeper into her furs. Keep scanning, just in case. Always, Commander. And with that, the ramp door sealed shut and the shuttle fell into stillness. But in the far trees beyond, just past the edge of camp, a pair of golden eyes blinked once, then vanished into the night. The fall. "Ayla, Ayla, Ayla." Bob's voice began in its usual calm tone, then built into cheerful insistence. "Happy birthday!" Ayla groaned and pulled the furs over her head. "And too early," she mumbled. "Only you are now 7 years old by Earth calendar time. Statistically, that means you're 2.3% more likely to be stubborn today," Bob teased. Ayla cracked a smile. "I'm always stubborn. Can that figure is higher than my estimates suggest." As she sat up, bleary-eyed and hair tangled from sleep, Peck gave an excited trill from the foot of the bed. She flapped her wings and bounced in a half circle, head bobbing and tail feathers fanned like a living party streamer. She hopped once more, spinning, and let out a joyful scraw that made Ayla wince and laugh at the same time. Okay, I'm up. Bob, ever the entertainer, broke into a surprisingly on-key rendition of Happy Birthday through the internal comm system. Peck chirped along, though not at all in tune. The morning passed with quiet joy. Ayla sat cross-legged beneath the awning, sunlight dappling her hair as she licked the last smear of sweet paste from her fingers. Breakfast had been simple but perfect grilled root cakes, crisped at the edges over the stone stove, and a dollop of golden fruit preserve from the emergency rations she'd been saving for a special day. It wasn't cake, but it was the closest she'd had to dessert since landing on Proxima Centauri B. Peck sat nearby, crunching happily through a full portion of roasted meat. Her eyes were half-lidded in contentment, her head occasionally leaning against Ayla's shoulder between bites. The air smelled faintly of smoke and flowers, and the breeze carried the sound of the river below steady, soothing. Ayla leaned back, propping herself up on her hands as she gazed across the camp. "I want to go swimming today," she announced, a sly smile playing at her lips. And no school, no lectures, just fun. Inside the shuttle, Bob's avatar blinked to life on the wall console. There was a pause. The faint hum of data processing filled the silence. And it is acceptable. Recreational activities are permitted on your birthday. However, I know, Ayla cut in, waving her hand. Avoid the strong currents. I'm not an idiot. Statistically speaking, Bob said with dry precision, and most recreational injuries occur when participants believe they are not at risk. Ayla grinned. You're just mad I didn't ask for a calculus module. And I find my disappointment difficult to quantify. She rolled her eyes and stood up, brushing off her tunic. Peck followed suit, stretching and fluffing her feathers. Then falling in behind Ayla with a low, happy trill, Ayla began packing lightly, her water skin, a snack pouch with dried greens and a chunk of dried meat, a cloth towel, and her birthday smile. No tools, no gear, no belt. Ayla, Bob's voice snapped to attention. And you are not bringing your sidearm. She paused mid-step. It's swimming, Bob. I don't need a weapon to splash around in a river. This planet is not without predators, he said, his tone turning firm. And you've encountered at least one unknown species capable of ambush. You are to take your sidearm. It's my birthday. And broken limbs are not exclusive to non-celebratory dates, he retorted. She huffed, opening the weapon locker and reluctantly strapping the compact sidearm to her thigh. Happy birthday to me, she muttered. Also your med kit. What? No, Bob, seriously, it's right down the path. I'm not going into the jungle. Bob didn't flinch. Sekshu will carry the med kit. Injuries may occur in any terrain. Please refer to page 3, section 1 of the survival protocol, subheading Complacency Kills. Ayla groaned audibly, but retrieved the medkit from its usual storage bin and clipped it to her side. You happy now? Only when you return safely. She gave a mock salute toward the console, then turned on her heel and marched toward the trail, with Peck trotting eagerly beside her. Bob's voice followed her out. Sem will be monitoring. Please check in every 30 minutes. Also, wear sunscreen. Sunscreen? She laughed. Oh, come on, Bob. And so I am detecting UV radiation levels 8% higher than average today. Okay, Dad. She was still laughing when they left camp. Peck chirped and wagged her tail feathers as if she too approved of the adventure. Ayla fell into a skip, humming an old Earth melody from the cat's archive. It was something folksy, about sunshine and running barefoot through meadows. She didn't know all the words, but the tune was light and carefree, perfect for a birthday. The trail wound downward toward the bend in the river where the water slowed, pooled, and sparkled like polished glass. The trees arched overhead in a loose canopy, and the air was warm with the scent of pine and sweet earth. Ayla was already planning her first dive. The river was perfect, The river meandered through the valley like a silver ribbon, its surface catching the warm orange hue of the alien sun overhead. Near the slow bend, the water widened and calmed, glassy and clear. Moss-covered boulders flanked the shoreline, some half submerged, others rising like emerald islands. Low-hanging trees arched over the water, their roots dipping into the stream, their strange, fan-like leaves swaying gently in the breeze. It was perfect. Ayla didn't hesitate. She dropped her pack on the riverbank, tugged off her fur-wrapped boots, and stepped into the shallows with a grin. "I race you!" she shouted, and darted forward with a splash. Peck leapt in after her, feet first with a tremendous swoosh, water fountaining around her. She flapped excitedly, sending ripples racing across the surface, her long tail flicking behind like a rudder. Her sharp beak cut through the water while her eyes stayed locked on Ayla, determined, mischievous. Ayla swam hard, her arms slicing through the cool water, the shock of it refreshing after the long walk. Laughter spilled from her lips in bursts, the kind that felt too big for her body. It echoed between the trees, pure and unburdened, louder than she had laughed in weeks. She floated for a while on her back, legs trailing, eyes on the sky where wispy pink clouds drifted across the soft lavender blue. Peck swam in lazy circles around her, occasionally splashing her with a flick of her wing or a playful nudge from her beak. Then she saw it. A vine thick, coiled, and roped like a braided mussel hung from a massive tree that arched out over the water just a few meters back from the main bend. It swayed gently in the breeze, its bottom frayed and worn but still strong-looking. Ayla waded over and reached for it, her fingers curled around its textured surface. She gave it a testing pull, leaning back with all her weight. It didn't budge. She mused aloud, eyes gleaming with mischief. Feels strong enough. In her ear, she could almost hear Bob's warning voice, that constant drone of logic and caution, unverified materials, unknown tensile strength. Swinging over shallow water poses unacceptable risk. But it was her birthday. She backed up several steps through the shallows, her feet squelching into the mud. Then she tightened her grip, took a breath, and ran. The moment her feet left the ground, she whooped with pure, wild glee. The vine arced high above the river, lifting her small frame into the warm air like a leaf on the wind. Her legs kicked out instinctively, her hair flew behind her like a comet's tail, and the sunlight lit her face with a golden glow. "Woohoo!" she screamed, laughing with wild abandon. At the apex of the swing, just as gravity reached out to tug her back down, she let go. She soared, briefly, weightless. Splash! She hit the water feet first, sending a fountain skyward. She surfaced moments later, sputtering, laughing, breathless with joy. Peck shrieked behind her and dove in too, her long body entering the water with a dramatic belly flop that soaked Ayla all over again. The second time was even better. The arc felt higher, smoother. She held her breath at the top and screamed just before letting go, timing it perfectly. The splash echoed down the valley. By the third try, her cheeks hurt from grinning. She backed up again, dripping, muscles warm, heart soaring. She gripped the vine and ran. It lifted her up once more, but this time something felt different. The fibers trembled beneath her grip. The twist of the vine unwound slightly mid-swing. Snap! She heard it before she understood it. A sharp tearing sound like thick cloth being ripped in half. Then the world dropped out from under her. She didn't scream this time. She didn't have time. The vine broke at its base, and Ayla plummeted not into the water, but toward the uneven stony riverbank just beside the shallows. Her body struck hard hip first, then elbow, then leg, an explosion of pain bursting through her right shin like lightning. She heard the crack, then she felt it. Then she screamed raw and jagged, a sound full of shock and terror. The sun still shone, the river still glistened, but the moment shattered into a blur of pain, grit, and breathless sobs. The pain was blinding. Ayla curled forward on the rocky bank, gasping for breath through clenched teeth. The pain was sharp and immediate, like fire threading through her lower leg. Her fingers dug into the moss-covered stones as she forced herself upright enough to look. No bones sticking through the skin, no blood, but her lower leg was already swelling fast. Her knee throbbed. Her ankle was stiffening. She tried to shift it and screamed. The sound echoed through the trees, then collapsed into a broken sob. She bit her lip hard, eyes blurring. Her mind raced. Comms, sidearm, med kit, all of it still across the river, tucked into her fallen pouch. "Bob," she whimpered, voice shaky and thin. "Bob," but there was no answer. The comms link, her lifeline to her artificial guardian, was gone, just out of reach but impossibly far. Then, movement. Peck burst from the tree line with a squawk, her claws kicking up bits of dirt as she skidded to a stop beside Ayla. Her head darted back and forth, eyes wild with panic as she circled Ayla once, then twice, scanning the surroundings, then fixating on Ayla herself. The young raptor chirped sharply, low and rapid. She nudged Ayla's arm with her beak, then nosed at her shoulder, trying to urge her up. Ayla cried harder, her voice small and shaking. I'm okay. Just give me a minute." But she wasn't. The pain wouldn't stop. Her whole body felt like it had shattered from the inside out. Peck let out a higher, sharper cry, frustration, fear. She stepped back and flared her wings, chest heaving, tail stiff. Then she quieted suddenly, crouched low, and lowered her head right next to Ayla's. Ayla looked up, dazed, and instinctively reached out, hugging her arms around Peck's neck, burying her face against the warm, living feathers. And Peck shifted. With a graceful twist of muscle and bone, she leaned lower, pressing her front half to the ground. Her wings opened and folded at an angle Ayla had never seen before, almost like a stepladder. One foot braced forward, the other planted steady, her tail flattened behind her. Ayla blinked. "Wait, what are you?" Peck looked back at her and gave a soft, deliberate chirp. Her eyes locked with Ayla's. You want me to ride?" Another chirp. Lower, confirming. She bobbed her head once. Ayla hesitated. Her hands trembled. "But I'm too heavy. I'll hurt you." Peck made a snorting huff, stamping one claw against the stone as if to say, "Get on." Ayla sniffed and wiped her eyes. She looked at the position Peck had assumed. Low, supportive, ready. Carefully, painfully, she slid forward on her stomach and reached up, hooking her arms around Peck's shoulders. She pressed her chest against the bird's back and with a grunt of pain, swung her good leg over. Peck didn't flinch. Ayla was surprised how naturally she fit. Her thighs settled just behind Peck's shoulders, her body pressing against the subtle ridge of feathered muscle that ran down the bird's back. She leaned forward, letting her arms curl around Peck's neck again. And then, wings. Peck's wings curled up and inward, wrapping gently around Ayla's legs, stabilizing her without pinching. Ayla gasped. "Whoa, that's perfect." Peck rose slowly, testing her footing. Ayla felt herself shift, but never slide. She was secure, cradled like a passenger in a seat made just for her. "Okay," she whispered. "Done okay, girl. Let's go." Peck didn't wait. She turned toward the trail and began to move, fast and sure, like she'd done this 100 times, and all Ayla could do was hold on and try not to cry from relief. The journey back was slow. Peck took careful steps on the uneven trail, her movements smooth and deliberate. Each muscle seemed to shift under Ayla with a measured grace that belied the raptor's usual high-energy pace. Ayla leaned forward, gripping tightly to the thick base of Peck's neck feathers with one hand, while bracing herself with the other along the ridge of the bird's shoulders. Her legs, still weak and aching, rested gently behind Peck's wings. She didn't need to grip hard. Peck's wings curled back around her thighs like natural restraints, soft feathers and firm muscle forming a gentle cradle that held her in place. Every dip and rise of terrain shifted Ayla slightly, but Peck adjusted in kind, flattening her step, bracing her hips, spreading her claws wider for balance. It felt like they were one creature. Ayla's weight seemed perfectly balanced against Peck's frame, her small body conforming to the curves of muscle, bone, and instinct. There was no saddle, no rope, no reins, but none were needed. Peck seemed to feel Ayla's balance, compensating for every micro shift in her posture without a second's hesitation. On flat ground, she moved faster, but never jarring. Her gait became a rhythmic glide, as if she were floating just above the dirt. The pain in Ayla's leg pulsed with each subtle bounce, a deep throb she clenched her jaw against. But she didn't cry out, didn't even speak. She wasn't alone. They reached the camp within the hour. Peck, sensing the urgency, bounded up the shuttle ramp and came to a sharp stop beside Ayla's bed. The sudden halt jolted Ayla slightly, but before she could slide off, Peck tilted her torso downward, letting Ayla roll gently forward into a sitting position at the edge of the mattress. Ayla half fell, half collapsed backward onto the bed with a sharp yelp of pain and relief. Bob's avatar flickered to life instantly in the corner of the room, the holographic blue figure taller and more intense than usual. "Ayla, what happened?" "I detect a significant elevation in heart rate, adrenaline, cortisol." "I fell," Ayla panted, trying to sit up. "Off a vine, at the river." Bob's form shifted, his core pulsing slightly brighter as he scanned her with the internal sensor grid. A soft pulse of light moved across her leg and chest, reading every detail. Diagnosis: non-compound fracture to the right tibia. No visible ligament or tendon damage. No misalignment. "You're extremely lucky, Ayla." "Doesn't feel lucky," she muttered, reaching out for the med kit tucked beneath the edge of her mattress. Bob stepped closer, his tone shifting from clinical to gently stern. "And you should have called for assistance the moment you were injured." "And my comms were in my pack across the river," she said, through gritted teeth as she grabbed a pain suppressor from the kit. "Noted," Bob said tightly. Your leg will need stabilization. I recommend at least 2 weeks of minimal movement. Full healing estimated at 4 to 6 weeks, depending on stress and activity. You are grounded, Commander." Ayla flopped back against the bed, wincing as she took one of the pain tabs and let it dissolve under her tongue. "So, Mrez? Until you are mobile, yes," Bob replied with no hint of sympathy. "And I will have the food synthesizer resume operations immediately." Ayla groaned. "I haven't eaten one of those in months. Consider this a lesson in overconfidence." She turned her head toward Peck, who had curled up beside the bed, eyes trained on her with silent concern. "Don't blame her," Ayla whispered. "She got me back." Bob's core dimmed slightly, as if in contemplation. "She may have saved your life." A long silence passed between them all, the girl, the bird, the AI. "Sentai don't recommend jungle adventures," Bob added gently. "But I'm glad you made it back." Ayla reached down and stroked Peck's head. "Yeah, me too." The weeks passed slowly. Bob tried to keep her in bed. Ayla tried to do too much. Every morning started the same way. Bob's voice, clinical but concerned, listed her restrictions with military precision. "Nunch, you are to remain supine for the majority of the day. Minimal weight-bearing activity. No outdoor excursions. No bending beyond 20 degrees. No—" "Fun," Ayla would mutter from beneath her fur blankets, arms crossed, glaring at the ceiling. They argued constantly. Ayla would inch toward the stove or the drying rack, dragging herself on elbows, stubborn and flushed with effort. Bob would instantly flicker into view beside her bed. "I must remind you that ignoring recovery protocols increases the risk of permanent damage. And not going to sit here like a lump for 6 weeks. Technically 4 weeks now, provided you don't re-injure yourself attempting acrobatics." Sometimes she cried out of frustration. Sometimes she threw things, mostly soft things. And every time Peck would step between them. Peck became her legs. Every morning the young terror bird left camp at first light. She would sniff the air, scan the ridge, and disappear into the trees, her feathers blending into the golden-green wilderness like a ghost. Ayla watched her go, anxious, protective, but never stopped her. Peck always came back. By mid-morning, she'd return with something dangling from her beak or talons, a plump rodent with too many legs, a feathered lizard thing with a gaping beak. Once she dropped a twitching, rabbit-like creature on the ramp with wide, luminescent eyes. "Peck!" Ayla had gasped, hobbling over with her crutch. "It's still alive!" Peck chirped, pleased with herself, and nudged the creature toward Ayla like an offering. Ayla had cringed, then done what needed doing. Bob walked her through it, as always. She cleaned and dressed the meat from her bed, dragging the work table closer using a rope pulley system Bob helped her rig. Her crutch, hand-whittled from a branch and reinforced with tubing from a disassembled drone, stood beside her like a loyal guard. She smoked the meat over the fire, salted it, skinned the creatures when their pelts were worth saving. She stitched a new pouch from that rabbit thing's hide and repurposed its teeth for a necklace. Even from her bed, Ayla stayed capable. And always, Peck remained close. She slept beside Ayla's bed every night, her body curled into a tight, warm ball of feathers. During the day, she kept to the shade under the awning or sat directly beside Ayla's mattress, resting her head on the edge to watch her. She never left unless she had to hunt. She was protective but gentle, careful not to jostle Ayla's healing leg. When Ayla leaned into her, Peck leaned back. When Ayla whimpered from pain, Peck trilled softly and nuzzled her hand. There were moments Ayla swore Peck understood every word she said. One afternoon, after cleaning 2 small kills and preparing a stew, Ayla looked at the pile of meat. "Oh, you've been working hard," she said. "You know you don't have to bring food every day, right?" Peck responded by dropping a bone in her lap. A gift. Ayla stared at her for a long time. Later that night, as the firelight flickered against the ceiling and the wind hummed through the trees beyond the shuttle, Ayla lay back on her mattress, exhaustion pulling at her bones. Peck was there, pressed against the bed's edge, breathing slow and steady. Ayla turned toward her and reached out to stroke the warm feathers along her neck. "Oh, you're the best thing that's ever happened to me," she whispered, barely audible. "I'd still be crying in a crater if it weren't for you." Peck didn't respond, but her eyes opened and she blinked once, slowly, then nestled her head down beside Ayla's mattress and closed them again. They drifted to sleep like that. Girl and bird, survivor and guardian, 2 hearts bound by the quiet understanding of those who have saved each other's lives. 5 weeks later, Ayla stood at the edge of the river. 5 weeks had passed since Ayla's fall, and though her leg wasn't perfect, she was strong again, strong enough, she told herself, to return to the river. She stood just outside the shuttle's ramp with her crutch tucked under one arm and a determined squint in her eye. The wind ruffled the tall grass. The sun was warm on her shoulders. She was dressed in her latest stitched hide gear, tight at the knees for support, loose at the shoulders for range, and she'd tied her growing hair back with a braided leather band. But Peck stood in the way. The young terror bird blocked the path, wings half spread, staring at her with a look that was half guardian, half protest. "I'm going," Ayla said, shifting her weight forward. Peck chirped, a soft guttural warning, and didn't budge. Ayla sighed. "I need to go. My stuff is still out there." Peck stood firm for a heartbeat longer, then let out a short exhale, and slowly knelt down. Her powerful legs folded beneath her body. Her wings extended outward, fanning just enough to suggest an invitation. She lowered her head and gave Ayla a long look, one that said, "Fine, but you're not going alone." Ayla blinked. "You want me to ride again?" Peck flicked her tail feathers, waiting. Ayla stepped forward cautiously and placed her hand on the bird's neck. Peck didn't flinch. Ayla tossed her crutch aside and used both arms to climb gently up. As she settled onto Peck's back, she felt her body slip naturally into the contours between feather and bone. Peck's wings curled gently around her legs, not tight but firm, stabilizing her like safety bars. It was like sitting in a saddle she was born for. "It's okay, girl," Ayla whispered, holding on. "Let's go." Peck rose smoothly and began walking, her gait steady and sure across the uneven terrain. The journey to the river was smoother than Ayla had expected. Peck navigated each bump and bend with practiced grace. Ayla swayed with her movement, adjusting unconsciously, and the wind played across her face as they picked up speed on open ground. Bob's voice chimed softly through her comset. "I am logging this mode of travel for analysis. It is unconventional," she offered. Ayla murmured, grinning. "Feels like flying." When they reached the riverbank, the mood shifted. Ayla dismounted slowly, careful not to jar her leg. She stood there for a long moment, staring at the place where the vine used to hang, where the bank once held her clothes, her sidearm, her gear. Everything was gone. She hobbled forward, scanning the area, jaw clenched. No satchel, no comms pack, no leather pouch, no signs of her sidearm. Nothing. Her heart thudded in her chest. "Bob?" she said quietly. "There's nothing here, not even scraps." Bob's voice came through, clear but tense. "It's possible the current swept your items away, or something removed them intentionally." Ayla turned back toward the slope leading into the trees. That's when she saw them. Footprints. At first, she thought they were hers, but they were too wide, too deep. She dropped to her knees, brushing the earth carefully with her fingers. The impressions were fresh, crisp in the soil. She traced the shape, long, slightly splayed. And then she saw the toes, 4 in the front, 1 in the back. Not human, not any animal she knew. The prints led away from the river, slightly northeast, parallel to the trail she often took. "Bub," she said, voice hushed. "You seeing this?" "I do. Stand by." She pulled her notepad from her belt and took a quick measurement using the ruler embedded in the leather binding. Print length, approximately 32 centimeters. Width at ball, 12. Heel, maybe 8. Aced on ground displacement and depth, Bob replied. Sinai estimate the creature's mass to be around 68 kilograms. Bipeds of that size are rare. There are no records in the biological scan library that match this anatomy. Ayla stared deeper into the woods. Beside her, Peck bristled slightly. Her head lifted. She scanned the forest edge, body alert, but not afraid. "You sense it too, huh?" Ayla asked. Peck gave a low chuff, but remained still. Ayla turned, ready to hobble back up the slope, but again Peck stepped in. She knelt without a word and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, you're going to spoil me," Ayla muttered as she climbed on. As they reached the flat terrain beyond the hill, Ayla felt a strange mix of fear and exhilaration. The wind whipped against her cheeks. The forest blurred at the corners of her vision. "Faster," she said softly. Peck picked up speed. "Faster, Peck!" She felt the surge as Peck's legs extended fully, claws gripping the dirt like anchors. Her wings tucked against her body, streamlined and swift. The ground flew beneath them. Bob's voice came over the comm again, surprised. "Ayla, how are you moving at over 40 kilometers per hour?" "Pastor, Peck!" Ayla whooped, laughing despite herself. "Oh, go, 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 go!" The trip that had taken them nearly an hour that morning was over in less than 15 minutes. Back at the shuttle, Peck ran up the ramp and came to a smooth stop. Ayla dismounted quickly and limped to her seat. Bob's avatar appeared almost instantly, flickering to life with folded arms and a frown on his usually featureless face. "And rode her like a personal transport system?" "She offered," Ayla said defensively. "And it worked, didn't it? You're lucky your leg didn't snap again." Ayla dropped into her chair, heart still racing, cheeks flushed. "But we found something," she said. "And not just missing gear, footprints. 4 toes in the front, 1 in the back, bipedal, and heavy." Bob was silent for a moment. "Then Kent will need to investigate further. I recommend a survey tomorrow, northwest of the river, in the direction those tracks lead." "I want to go." "I expected you would. In that case, please retrieve a backup sidearm from storage drawer K9 before departing. You are not to leave this camp unarmed again. Understood?" Ayla nodded. "Understood." Bob's voice softened slightly. "And please be careful." She looked down at Peck, who had curled near her feet again, eyes watching her. Ayla reached out and scratched the base of her feathered neck. "Don't worry," she said softly. "Oh, we've got this." But as she leaned back in her chair and looked toward the forest beyond, a sliver of uncertainty wormed its way into her thoughts. Because whatever had taken her things had feet, and it walked like her.